Gislin's voice rang out across the battlefield, carrying a message of defiance to both his mercenaries and Perdium soldiers. Despite their inferior numbers, he declared that from this moment on, they would begin their counterattack. Even though their numbers were greatly inferior, the Black Cavalry under Gislin's leadership showed neither fear nor hesitation as they thundered toward one flank of the enemy's formation. Dygald's siege tower had already been festered on the Perdium's walls, leaving no space for the defenders to breathe or regroup. Yet, despite the unrelenting advance of the invading infantry, not a single soul on the walls wavered. While Victor focused his efforts on seizing control of the main gate, Gislin led a third of the mercenary forces in a flanking maneuver against the right side of the enemy formation. Simultaneously, Kair directed another detachment from a different direction, with Belinda providing key support. Meanwhile, Gillian led the final group of mercenaries on a daring ambush mission, targeting the heart of Dygald's rear encampment. Gillian's massive axe tore through enemy ranks with savage force. Each swing cleaved through multiple soldiers, leaving a trail of devastation. A handful of elite mercenaries followed close behind him, their movements sharp and disciplined, reinforcing his every step with lethal precision. As he pushed deeper into enemy lines, Gillian barked orders to Gordon and Torrent. He intended to be the decoy, pulling the enemy's gaze and fury upon himself. He told the others to disperse widely and disable vital facilities to sow chaos. Without hesitation, the two acknowledged the command and moved to execute it. Even in the thick of combat, the mercenaries exchanged breathless words. Torrent noted how unnerved the enemy appeared, shocked by how few stood against them. Gordon echoed the sentiment, jesting that by the time they returned to the castle, all that would remain of the enemy camp would be scorched rubble. The situation rapidly unraveled for Tamos, the incompetent commander of Dygald's forces. Stunned by the surprise assault, he struggled to comprehend how such a counteroffensive had emerged from a cornered opponent. His mind blank, he failed to rally his soldiers, even as his aides urged him to abandon the camp and escape. That window of opportunity never arrived. Gillian surged forward, cutting down soldiers in his path without mercy, his axe stained with the blood of those foolish enough to resist. He charged directly at the command center, declaring loudly his intent to capture Count Dygald alive as a prisoner of war. His axe pulsed with mana, glinting menacingly beneath the sunlight. Tamos knew in his gut that Gillian could not be stopped. The man charging toward him was an unstoppable force, driven by pure will and fury. Yet at the last possible moment, a glimmer of salvation flashed before him. A sword strike, fast and precise, arced toward Gillian. Instinctively, Gillian turned, catching the blow with a powerful swing of his own. The clash of weapons echoed through the battlefield as Gillian's mana-charged axe met the massive sword head-on. Sparks scattered with the force of the impact, the sound rising above the din of war. The two warriors pulled back slightly, locking eyes as they assessed one another. A knight of such caliber had not been seen in Dygald's camp until now. The sudden appearance of another high-level knight at their rear only deepened the despair. This knight clearly hadn't been drawn from Dygald's own ranks. Count Dygald lacked the merit to rally such strength, being a selfish noble unfit to rule, much less lead a disciplined army. From just a single exchange of blows, Gillian realized the strength of his adversary. This was not an enemy to underestimate, not in the heart of hostile territory, where one wrong move could end everything. Seated tall upon his horse, the knight was Adon Freso. He observed Gillian with a calm expression, commenting on the audacity of Perdium's forces to strike so deep into Dygald's camp with such a modest number. There was something almost admiring in his tone. Adon swung his sword again in a smooth, practiced motion. With a knight's honor, he asked his opponent to give his name in recognition of strength shared in combat. Gillian remained silent. His gaze never wavered. His eyes, burning with an eerie and focused killing intent, studied Adon from head to toe as he readied himself for the next clash. Gillian lifted his axe high, his entire frame pulsing with unrestrained mana. With a voice heavy with conviction, he declared himself nothing more than a nameless weapon in service to the young lord of Perdium. His unwavering loyalty stemmed from a single, life-altering event that Ghislain had saved his daughter from the eternal punishment. From that day forward, Gillian's devotion had been absolute. Meanwhile, chaos engulfed the left side of Perdium's castle wall. Enemy infantry swarmed like a mass of ants, climbing ladders in relentless waves. The defenders held the line only because they were no strangers to war. Hardened by long battles with the northern barbarians, they refused to yield. Belinda fought with grim determination, determined to provide the defenders with a sliver of relief. She knew that if left unchecked, the wall would soon fall to the enemy's hands. Spotting two enemy soldiers closing in, she lashed them together and hurled the bound pair toward Kair, who rode nearby and was carving through the flank. Kair accepted her help eagerly, his eyes flashing with excitement. As the bound enemies tumbled through the air, he stepped forward and brought his sword down in a single, fluid motion, slicing through both with brutal precision. Blood sprayed across the battlefield, a crimson arc against the sky. Caught in the exhilaration of battle, the insecurities that once haunted him faded, replaced by the unshakable spirit of a warrior. He surged forward, cutting through enemies with tireless energy. Despite the overwhelming numbers, some lightness remained among the chaos. Belinda called out to Kair, scolding him for splashing blood in her direction again. Kair laughed it off, referring to her dismissively as a mere lady and advising her to dodge if she had time to complain. Belinda flushed red with anger at the remark, clearly offended by the condescension. On the right wall, Ghislain led a third of the black cavalry unit from the front, rending through Dygald's flank with merciless efficiency. Each swing of his sword shattered the enemy's formation. Not even the heavy infantry could withstand a single blow. In the heart of battle, he revealed the essence of a warlord. The mercenary king fought in the most perilous position, mastering the release of his second mana core with each breath to conserve stamina. The sight of Ghislain charging alone with monstrous force shattered the enemy's morale. Even with superior numbers, no one dared to meet him head-on. Once the mercenary army closed the gap and the opposition faltered in confusion, Ghislain issued a rallying cry. It was time to press forward and annihilate them. As the mercenaries broke through the enemy formation, Ghislain shifted his focus to the siege tower docked against the wall. He paused briefly, drawing a slow breath, and his eyes took on a glacial sharpness, a signal of the carnage to come. The mercenaries wasted no time. Their experience pioneering the forest of beasts had taught them that survival meant obeying their leaders' every command. Not one hesitated, not one fled. They charged together, reckless yet unyielding. A captain from Dygald's army could do nothing but curse beneath his breath. Watching his men abandon formation in fear, he saw discipline dissolve in the face of Perdium's terrifying black cavalry unit. Ghislain galloped toward the wall once more, a line of the spearmen held up. Even with the sight of blood, followed Ghislain's path in his solitary charge. Despite being human, Ghislain fought atop his steed with a fluidity and unity that matched any elven rider. As the enemy blockade came into view, he gave his horse a simple order, to dodge the blockade alone, and the beast obeyed with a sharp exhale. The spearmen launched their attack, spears thrusting in perfect unison. For the first time in the battle, they managed to reach Ghislain, only because he had chosen to barrel through them, unwavering in his charge toward the siege tower. Then, without warning, Ghislain vanished from the saddle. He had leapt. The horse slipped through the formation with comical ease, untouched by the flurry of spear tips. While the spearmen were still turning their heads in confusion, trying to make sense of the vanished rider, Ghislain had already taken to the air. His sword was drawn high, poised to strike while the enemy below remained frozen in disarray. He came crashing down atop one of the spearmen, locking the man between his legs as he descended with punishing force. Using the spearmen as leverage, Ghislain twisted his body and swung his sword in a wide arc, cleaving through the ranks of those who dared to bar his path. His movements were fluid and unhesitating. There was no room for doubt, for he understood with ruthless clarity, and hesitation would bring swift encirclement from all sides. Once the opposing spearman had been dispatched, Ghislain released the body he had used as a pivot, allowing the inertia of his spin to carry him into one final motion. With decisive precision, he brought his blade across the man's neck. Blood sprayed forth, sealing the act with finality. His sword now dripped with the blood of countless foes. None had been spared in his wake. The ground behind him lay desecrated, littered with limbs, broken bodies, and the carnage wrought by unrelenting force. No formation or resistance had managed to endure the overwhelming might unleashed by his fully activated second mana core. His eyes locked ahead. The siege tower loomed, tall and ominous, a grotesque structure feeding Daigald's heavy infantry onto the crumbling battlements. Below, a dense cluster of enemy soldiers formed a blockade between him and the towering structure. Yet, not a shred of hesitation clouded Ghislain's mind. A glint of sheer, razor-edged intent reflected in his eyes. No one standing there deserved mercy. Not a single soul among the enemy ranks would be spared. His verdict had already been rendered. Annihilation alone was acceptable. In one glance, he took in the situation. The wall's defense was in worse condition than he had anticipated. The collapse was imminent, likely to fail even before the gate could be breached. His black cavalry had pushed valiantly, breaking through where they could, but the disparity in numbers was severe. If they faltered even slightly, they would be enveloped. But surrendering momentum was not an option. Ghislain inhaled deeply, resolving himself once more. His eyes gleamed with renewed determination. He would keep pressing forward, no matter the cost. A corps captain from Daigald's forces issued an urgent command, rallying his soldiers to strike. The siege tower had reached its target. With the wall would soon fall, all that remained was to stop the black-armored knight who stood in their way. The soldiers surged toward him. Ghislain raised his sword over his shoulder, steadying his breathing. For a brief instant, he tapped into the volatile energy of his third mana core, enhanced by the strange power obtained after absorbing the venom of the blood python. Though not yet equal to the legendary state of transcendence, the refinement of his mana gave his blade the sharpness needed to cut through iron as if it were cloth. His sword flashed. The first soldier to challenge him stood no chance. The weapon passed through his iron helmet with no resistance, the man collapsing without a sound, a mere offering to Ghislain's relentless advance. Another stepped forward to take his place. Armed with a crude sword and a wooden shield, the man roared a curse and lunged. But before his attack could even form, his neck had already been severed by a clean, efficient stroke. Still more poured in. A heavily armored soldier jabbed forward with precision. Ghislain tilted his body and dodged with finesse, then countered with a savage slice into the man's side. Another enemy appeared immediately, blade raised and aimed for his head. Ghislain parried the strike, halting its momentum. Without slowing, he pushed forward. The explosive nature of his mana surged through his limbs, powering the motion as he spun and drove his blade across the attacker's back. Drawing closer to the siege tower, he came under a new threat. Arrows began raining down. The archers had taken position. Recognizing Ghislain's true target, the captain shouted furiously for every archer to focus their fire. The archer's captain ordered that the man was not to be allowed near the tower. But Ghislain was already past their sights. His body blurred into motion, streaking through the hail of arrows. None found their mark. Only the faint, gleaming trace of his killing intent remained in the space he left behind. Ghislain's next target stood above the fray. A corps captain mounted atop a trembling horse. The captain met Ghislain's gaze, his eyes wide with dread and throat tightening with fear. Whatever resolve had brought him to war now withered before the monstrous presence of the black-armored warrior. Without pause, Ghislain launched forward. His sword pierced cleanly into the captain's body before the man could lift his weapon. The captain offered no resistance. His fear had paralyzed him. and the terrifying aura of his attacker proved too overwhelming to confront. As though hoisting a carcass on a spit, Ghislain lifted the man's body into the air, twirled it with brutal elegance, and hurled both sword and corpse together toward the siege tower's thick central beam. The line of resistance that had dared block Ghislain's advance was now obliterated. The tower's archers, still fumbling to reload, bore witness to a horrific spectacle. One of their commanding officers slain and strung through the air like a display of vengeance. The sword embedded itself deep in the siege tower's wood. Blood spattered across the surrounding platform, painting the battlefield in fresh crimson. A stunned silence followed. Without delay, Ghislain tugged on a thread of mana, an ethereal link he had tied to the hilt of his sword. In one seamless motion, he leapt, drawn upward through the air by the arcane tether. The motion defied logic. None among the enemy could comprehend what was unfolding. All they saw was that the black-armored warrior had taken flight, soaring unrestrained toward the siege tower's highest platform. As Ghislain reached the top, his hand caught the hilt of the embedded sword. The blade, still soaked with blood, landed firmly in his grip. In that same instant, he swung. Terror surged through the defenders above, their minds filled with unspeakable dread, paralyzed as they recalled the massacres he had already wrought. Every line of defense that had previously tried to stop him now lay in ruin, replaced only by blood and severed limbs. Activating his third mana core once more, Ghislain allowed raw fury to flood his senses. His eyes flashed with cold judgment as he brought the sword down in an explosive arc. The entire top section of the tower split under the weight of the blow. No one could challenge him. Not here, not now. This siege tower, a key element of Victor's siege strategy and aligned perfectly with textbook military doctrine, was left almost undefended. The defenders had been stretched too thin along the walls, unable to secure every breach. Ghislain's timely assault now offered a vital reprieve to those still fighting on the ramparts. The shock spread rapidly through Dygald's ranks. The destruction of a siege tower by a lone knight in black armor had shaken even the most hardened soldiers. Yet some believed this act of defiance to be a foolish gamble. They reasoned that once the tower collapsed, its would-be invaders would swarm the lone attacker. Observing the collapse from afar, Victor remained outwardly calm. He pondered whether the warrior who destroyed the tower was the same black cavalry commander responsible for the devastating flank assault. As a plume of dust rose from the crumbling tower, Ghislain stepped away from the wreckage with steady resolve. The move he had made was bold, driven less by calculation and more by instinct. He had exploited the narrowest of weaknesses in Victor's formation. In the chaos of war, he had discerned the enemy's intent, gauged the battlefield's rhythm, and seized the fleeting moment. Victor turned to one of his soldiers and asked if the gate had finally been breached. The soldier faltered, stammering an explanation. The gate proved more fortified than they had initially assumed. Internal interference had delayed their progress, but he estimated success within 10 minutes. Victor remained silent for a breath. That delay could allow the black-armored warrior to rampage freely within their ranks. Deciding to act, Victor prepared to enter the battlefield himself. He walked forward, instructing his troops to break through the gate within 5 minutes. In the meantime, he would deal with the enemy commander personally. Before turning away, Victor shot a glare back at the soldier, his cold gaze heavy with killing intent. The message was unmistakable. Failure would be met with death at his own hand. Terror surged into the soldier's expression as he quickly confirmed the order with his trembling voice. At that very moment, a mounted mercenary emerged from the cloud of dust, hurling taunts at Victor and referring to him mockingly as a winged tin can. Cloaked in grit and ash, the rider announced that he would be going nowhere. Victor's gaze shifted slightly as he asked the newcomer's identity. The rider revealed himself as Kair, the commander of the Cerberus Mercenary, his sword pointed directly at Victor in a bold challenge. A wide grin spread across his face, fueled by the thrill of confrontation. Having broken through the enemy's flank, Kair had reached the heart of Daigald's assault. Upon spotting the strongest opponent in their ranks, he could not resist the urge to call him